I'd like to call to order the April 2nd, 2014 meeting of the Frederick County Planning Commission. And I hope you'll join us in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Let's see, Ray, regarding the agenda, there are no changes.
Madam Chairman, move for adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We've got one set of minutes.
Madam Chair, move for adoption of the March 5th minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. All righty, we've got some committee reports. The first is, I'm going to call on Mr. Thomas for the Economic Development Commission.
Yeah, the EDC met on the 7th of March. They discussed the annual report for economic interest. One of the interesting discussion was on that. Some of the observations, the tax base for Winchester Frederick County was up in 2013 from 2012. The average wages are up again for Frederick County during that period. Unemployment rate is dropping that same time frame. The only thing that is a little bit negative, as a summary item, the average wage for the Winchester Frederick County is about $10,000 less than the average wage for the state. Winchester Frederick County is $42,512, and the average wage for the state is $52,000. So, but everything else, we look positive. Average wage, we're still probably a little bit low, but improving.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Moen, we have CPPC.
We haven't met since the last meeting. We have our next meeting on the 14th, but work continues on the South Frederick land use study. So we will be meeting again on the 14th. That's right,
I'm reaching back into March.
further back.
Okay. Mr. Unger, the Sanitation Authority?
Yes, ma'am. We met March the 18th. The total customer base for water is 14,304. Sanitation is 13,549. Current rainfall for last month was 3.16 inches, which is about average. We usually do about 3.23 or something for an average, but that's real good. The water production for the Deal plant was 2.57 million gallon per day. The Anderson plant was 1.78 million gallon per day. We purchased 0.85 million gallons per day from the city. Daily average is 5.2, and that's pretty normal. The Deal plant has risen about 4 feet in the last month and a half. Anderson plant has risen about 3 feet in the last month and a half, which is good. And the Parkers Mill plant, we're having a little bit of a problem with nitrogen being too high. Hood is putting a little bit too much nitrogen to us, and we're having trouble controlling that. It was 8.9 nitrogen last month, and we're not supposed to be over 3.2, so we're going to get called down for that. And the other thing, the leakage in the water is about 5% last month, which is very good. It's usually up around 13 to 15, so we're doing pretty good on our leakage for the water now. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Owens? The Transportation, yes.
Yes, ma'am. We met and discussed the 277 improvements. VDOT laid out the plans. Basically, the cost of the right-of-way acquisition is a lot more than what was budgeted. So although they're going to engineer the plans for full design and build out, the actual construction is probably going to come in short, somewhere around Double Church Road or a little bit less for now until more money can be obtained. And also under other, the Shenandoah project came back to us about talking about the private streets, and Transportation Board basically said send it on to DRC, which we had also
Right.
last month.
Exactly. Mr. Unger, would you like to report on DRRC?
Yes, ma'am. We met March 27th, and we talked about private streets in the RA zoning district. And we had a pretty lengthy discussion about it. basically, nobody had a heartburn about it, except for the fact that the biggest fear is the county may have to someday take the streets over if something happens that the subdivision would, not make enough money to take care of the streets, and that's the biggest problem with it. We don't really fear that they do private streets, it's just we don't want the county to have to take them over down the road 20 years from now or something. And it's going to be coming to the planning commission to be talked about, so we'll see how everybody feels about it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The City of Winchester is represented. Mr. McKenna, would you like to report?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Things have been relatively quiet in the city. Our last meeting, we had some amendments to our zoning ordinance, one dealing with floodplain regulations, the other dealing with alternative financial institutions. We also had a discussion on vacating a portion of Indian Alley for the Shenandoah Valley Discovery Museum. Our next meeting, it looks like we're getting a little busier. We've got 4 public hearings scheduled, and in our work session, we have a discussion on corridor enhancement districts and a comprehensive plan and how that fits with the new John Kerr Elementary School.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
I did call you the wrong name, and I apologize, Mr. Slaughter.
That's okay.
I know who you are. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yes, and I think finally for our reports, Mr. Hess from the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, there were no items on the board's agenda on their meeting of March 26 pertaining to the Planning Commission, so really don't have any feedback in that regard. We are looking forward to the items that are on your agenda tonight and other things related to the county's Business Climate Assessment Citizens Committee, which is pretty commonly referred to as the Business Friendly Committee, and we're really looking for the Planning Commission's feedback on that.
That's great. Okay, I think that does it for us. I will like to open the citizen comment portion. This is the part of the agenda where we're asking you to come and address us on anything other than what's in the public hearing. We'll have time for that. And so either address us on something that's on your mind or something that you'd like to comment on with these other items. Anyone?
John Good, Stonewall District. I was the subcommittee chairman of the Land Use Committee of the what's commonly referred to as the Business Friendly Committee. And we had comments on a number of things back to the Board of Supervisors. The landscape ordinance was amongst those comments. When we initially started our meetings, I had several of my committee members expressed reservations about our work with comments like, it isn't going to amount to anything, it's going to be a waste of time, they really won't change anything. I told those people I thought they were wrong because I thought Chairman Dick Schickel, the rest of the Board of Supervisors, and John Rowley were seriously interested in what business folks in the community had to say, and that I thought if we took our job seriously and reported back to the board, Mr. Riley, that we would see some action take place. Within the last week, tripped into your agenda, and then I saw the landscape ordinance was on there. Dug a little deeper to look and see what that was about, and quite frankly, the only recommendation for change in that was probably the least important thing we recommended that would change. Eric Lawrence provided for me some minutes of the subcommittee meeting, I believe it's DRRC, and I could tell from the minutes of the meeting that you did not receive all of our recommendations. Apparently, you only got a portion of it, and the cover letter, which referenced other things in addition to the landscape ordinance, included almost a full page of comments about the landscape ordinance, and I saw no reference to that and no comment based on that. So to try to rectify this, I'll take the blame for it because I didn't show up, didn't know it was occurring, probably should have paid more attention. I'd like to, if the Planning Commission so moved, visit with the committee, bring the recommendations with me to make sure they get delivered, and make a presentation to put things in a context. And I think that would be beneficial and reflect what the Business-Friendly Committee, and Steve Slaughter was on that committee, actually thought. And there was a diversity of opinion there, but very strong opinions about the landscape ordinance. And by the way, we appreciate the proposed modification on making another exception before the master development plan if a full-blown site plan is presented. I think that's a good thing. Finally, I shared the status of the landscape ordinance with the other members of the committee, and I received what's probably the nicest email I've ever received, where the message was, "I told you so." That was from one of the committee members that said nothing was going to get changed. So I want to reverse that and tell them I told them so. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to address us about anything other than a public hearing? Well, seeing none, we will close the citizen comment portion. We do have two public hearings this evening. The first is a conditional use permit 02-14, Jessica M. Neff for a kennel. The property is located at 461 Laurel Grove Road and is identified by property identification number 73-9-3 in the Back Creek Magisterial District. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This property is currently zoned RA rural areas. Its land use is residential. The adjoining properties are also zoned RA rural areas, and their land uses are residential, vacant, and the Agricultural Research Center for Virginia Tech to the west on this property. If I could turn your attention to the map on your left, that gives you an outline of where the property is located, where this proposed kennel for boarding will occur. Kennels are a permitted use in a rural area zoning district with an approved conditional use permit. This proposed use will take place on a 7-acre parcel surrounded by RA zone properties. The properties immediately adjacent to the proposed CUP are zoned RA, and with the nearest dwelling being approximately 600 plus feet from where this proposed dog kennel for boarding will take place. The Frederick County Comprehensive Policy Plan calls for this area to remain rural in character, and there is no ongoing land use study in this area of the county currently. The applicant has also provided, I think it was in your application, but I also put up on the screen, an idea of if you can make it out where they're going to set this kennel house with a fence. It's not a run, it's a fenced in area, and I'll explain that a little bit, and also let the applicant explain that. The kennel proposed building area is located behind the structure, and they're also going to provide on their driveway where they'll have customers come and bring their dogs for boarding. The applicant has indicated they want no more than 28 dogs on the property at any given time and are agreeable to the hours of operations. With the dogs will be confined indoors when they are walked or exercised. Excuse me, they'll always be indoors, but except when they're walked or exercised, and that will not be prior to 8 a.m. And all the dogs that are boarding there will have to be confined indoors prior to 9 p.m. With that, Madam Chair, the staff would suggest the following conditions be assigned to this conditional use permit for a kennel. Number one, all review agency comments and requirements should be complied with at all times. No more than 28 dogs should be permitted on the property at a given time. Number three, this conditional use permit is solely to enable the boarding of dogs on this property, not breeding, boarding. I just want to make that understandable, and I think the applicant's going to bring that up also. Number four, no employees other than those residing on the property shall be allowed. Number five, all dogs should be controlled and not to create a nuisance to any adjoining property owners or be roaming free or barking at any given time. Number six, all dogs shall be confined by 9 p.m. and not allowed to be let doors prior to 8 a.m. Number seven, there will be proposed business signs shall be conformed to cottage occupation sign requirements and should not exceed 4 square foot in size and 5 feet in height. And number eight, any expansion or modification of this conditional use permit would require an approval of a new conditional use permit. For the record, Ms. Jessica Neff is here. She is the applicant, and I'll answer any questions on this conditional use permit for a kennel for boarding of dogs. Thank you.
Questions of Mr. Chairman? Any? Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Ms. Neff, would you like to speak with us? If you'll give us your name and magisterial district, please.
Yes, I am Jessica Neff, and I'm with am I in the Back Creek District? And I am proposing to run a dog boarding kennel. No breeding will be at this kennel. All the dogs will be inside at all times, except to use the bathroom outside and exercise during the day, approximately about 4 to 6 times a day.
Any questions of Ms. Neff?
Jessica, what's the structure going to be built out of?
What's it going to be built out of? It's going to be basically a freestanding garage. The walls are going to be constructed wider than normal walls to provide more insulation for the noise, and also to keep in the heat and or cold during winter and summer. There will be heat and
I
AC.
assume you're going to probably insulate the walls also?
The walls will be insulated along with the attic.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Would anyone in the audience like to speak to us regarding this conditional use permit? Anyone at all? All righty, and if for those that like to speak, if you'll come to the mic and give us your name and magisterial district, please.
What's this building? Do you know what that is? No, it's on that.
Nice. I do have something typed, and I will have
great.
that for you, okay?
Yeah.
Can you hear now?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
I'm Sheila Penner, and I live at 408 Laurel Grove Road, and my property would face the proposed kennel. I would like to talk about the valuation of property. I know that there's something similar going on in Clark County, and it's been quoted in the Winchester Star. According to the Commissioner of Revenue in Clark County, your property devalues 20% if you're located next to a dog kennel. And looking up information on this, I've seen quotes anywhere from 15 to 50% of devaluation of your property. We're in a rural area. My family and I have been there for 42 years. We built on family property, and most of my neighbors in that area are local families. There's no need for this kennel. This service is provided all through Frederick County. There are other kennels that are available. I don't understand why, we would be subjected to this. You can go to any window in my home, and it will face the kennel. I'm retired. My husband's retired. We've been there for over 42 years, and we look to enjoy our retirement in the serenity and peacefulness of the county rural area, not a business.
Ms. Penner, would you describe, certainly for me, I didn't get it when you said where your home was.
It's right across the road, kind of. It's not catty corner exactly. I'm here, and it would be here.
Maybe if he'd bring the map up.
You could bring the map up. You'll have to tell me what I'm looking at. I'm at 40.
Here's Laurel Grove right here.
Okay. Probably, yeah. We're a paved driveway. Is that my property
Yes,
right
ma'am.
there? That's my property.
Excuse me, Mark, would you put your...
Top of the page?
I'm sorry, Ms. Penner.
It's okay.
Property right here.
Thank you. That helps.
Okay.
It's the paved driveway. You can't even see the property.
Had a corner right there, so I don't have to say yes.
Any front, I can look from the front windows in my home, and I can see the proposed building, and I can see the property. I have several questions, obvious questions, other than the devaluation of property. I want to know if a noise study's been done. I want to know if, what's going to happen with the waste. If there's 28 animals going, 28 coming in, how's the waste going to be handled? I want to know if there's any runoff. I want to know about odor. There's other obvious questions, that can be asked, but the devaluation of the property, when you've worked for 40-some years and your property's all you own, 15%'s a lot. 50%'s a lot. But I'm just asking, I understand that she wrote a wonderful letter and talked about her dream, but my dream is to stay where I am. And I'd like to know, ask the county two questions. I understand Virginia doesn't have a law requiring a nuisance voucher to be prepared. I mean, they don't require you to report that. There's a form that actually says that it does not require you to report that in Virginia. I've been reading on that. So what would happen if, say, I didn't like the kennel and I would want to move, and I didn't have to fill out this form, but there's realtors in the area that know there's a kennel there, neighbors know there's a kennel there. How do I know that my property is going to be protected from being devalued? I have a lot of questions, and like I said, I had a typed format. I'd be happy to leave that with every one of you.
That would be great. Actually, if you give it to the secretary, that will help.
That would help a lot.
Yeah,
Okay,
that'd be great.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir, you were next.
My name's Scott Berman. My address is 247 Laurel Grove Road.
Your last name again?
Berman, B-E-R-M-A-N.
Thank you, Mr. Berman.
I think a lot about Jessica and Jason, and this isn't personal. I share the same concerns this woman just stated. I went so far when I heard about this, and I just came to my attention the last week or so, although I know they did a good job disseminating the information. I found a kennel of like size in Warren County, so I wanted to go and see for myself. This place is Cavalier Kennel. It's built with, they told me, triple drywall, special sound dampening walls, 2x6 construction. Nice people. Again, actually, I think a little bit smaller than the kennel they're proposing. I then went around and started talking to neighbors. I had neighbors a mile away who said they were not opposed to the kennel based on what they had heard in the construction and didn't feel there would be issues, but they are now very unhappy. I heard the same as this woman just stated. People were complaining about property values. One person who had their house on the market has already had problems with that. We live across a field from the Neffs. As a matter of fact, Jason's grandfather built their house, and they've been great neighbors, and it's a great neighborhood. But it's between their house and our house is open space. I could hear a dog in that area now. I can't imagine 20 dogs. I don't think it's practical. It's just not a practical location. Again, there are better places for it, not a non-residential area. I don't know if the Virginia Tech Research Center borders their property. I don't know if Virginia Tech has been contacted and they're aware. I mean, they're probably 100 feet from these proposed kennels. I don't know if they've stated any objections or they even know. But again, that's their concern. My concern is just silence. It's a residential, quiet area. We spent a lot of money on our house and improving our house, and this is not going to be a good thing for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. Yes.
Which direction is your house?
Yes.
I'm trying to get my bearings there. Pardon me, I'll walk up here. So that big building, I'm assuming, is the Virginia Tech Research Center, if I'm correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so is this the Neffs here,
Yes.
I assume? And then Mrs. Miller would be here. I would be right about here. Although there's usually a bunch of, okay, towards here, there's an apple orchard here, but I would be right out to this side. As I said, I could hear one dog in that area, let alone a whole host of them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak regarding this conditional use permit? I feel the need to perhaps mention what a conditional use permit is. And a conditional use permit, if you saw Mark's list in terms of the conditions, they have to be adhered to at all times. And it's your right, if you find that there is a dilemma here, to come to planning and, if you will, present your complaint. Now, conditional use permit, if it's not being operated properly and if there's too much dog noise, My understanding is that it can be removed. And so I think you need to know where you are in this process, and the conditional use permit is what we're talking about. Mark, would you like to address some of the issues that were raised?
I guess to start with the reviewing agencies, and we'll let up to the applicant, they were talking about waste. This way, the applicant cannot put the waste in the septic tank or the drain field on site. I'll let the applicant ask what they're going to do with that waste. That has come up before with kennels and for breeding. As far as noise ordinance, I'm going to hopefully, Mr. Williams can help me with that a little bit. We do have a noise ordinance in the county. I'm letting him look at that. As far as the building, as was pointed out by Ms. Neff, and the other point, the building she's building should confine those dogs. I know with the kennel, that has come up. I know in Frederick County, we've had 2 kennels in the last, I don't know how many years, that were viable kennels. One was for breeding, and that was a little different. We had another one for breeding. It was on a small scale. We had a large scale breeding one for, I think Mr. Thomas was still on the board then, was the Spades, had the hounds out there at upper part of Back Creek, and that was an issue. The Aberdeen kennel is a little different because it was more of a commercial. They had runs. That's on Route 11. That was through a conditional use permits, but they also had, what needs to be remembered, not the other issues up at Aberdeen, but just stick with the land use there. They also, at Aberdeen, had a vet clinic, and they also boarded. But that was a little bit bigger scale. That's the 2 or 3, if you will, kennels that we have in Frederick County that have come before this board. We've had some pet sitting and things of that nature. As far as the noise, again, I don't, looking if there's any noise ordinance out in that part that, I think you hit it right there, Madam Chair, that the conditional use permit does say these animals have to be controlled indoors, other than when the applicants bring it up, not prior to 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying that barking dogs are dogs, but I think we have enough in our conditions to make that happen. Obviously, if you all feel through discussion we need to put more on it, we'll talk to the applicant and do it that way.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, will you help us with a question about valuation and assessment and things of that nature?
I can try. I mean, valuation and assessment it's in essence a subjective study that's done by the Commissioner of Revenue's office based on data they have available to them. I'm not aware of any hard and fast rules that say this is next to a kennel, so therefore it must be deducted by. It's a subjective process.
Thank you. Anyone have any other questions or thoughts as to where we are?
The only thing I would say to the applicant is there's a lot of different construction techniques that you can use a lot of sound abatement in a building. You could build the building that you could have 50 dogs in there barking and no one outside would hear it. That's just a cost standpoint. You know, you're going to hit the benefit cost ratios where you're going to have to decide where you want to be. But when dogs are outside, they're going to bark, and there's no way to muzzle them outside that they don't bark. So I would just, encourage you to be mindful of what the chairman said about the conditions and what could happen if something did go wrong. But certainly with the building construction, you can't hear anything outside of it. But there's just different techniques to do that.
Yes, Mr. Unger.
Madam Chairman, I was concerned about the noise in this operation too, and I went down to the SPCA and stood out in the parking lot just to see how bad the noise was. And I'm sure there were dogs in there, but I heard no barking absolutely at all. And I'm assuming some of them was probably barking at the time I was there. I would think with an enclosed building like that, I can't see where it would be a problem. I mean, you couldn't hear but the SPCA, and I know they had dogs in there.
Other comments? Any other thoughts? This is a...
Madam Chairman, I'm familiar somewhat with this location, and and what that surrounding area is. It is, I don't want to say a very rural area, but it is, certain times of the year, this is agricultural land. It's buffered by corn. It looks like we're seeing large stands of trees on these photos that we have. I'm not sure where the one gentleman's house was located, but I don't know if it's pertinent for right now. But I kind of agree with Mr. Unger there. I think, and Mr. Thomas, there's a lot of mitigating things we can do and they can do to soundproof this. This area out here is farmland. There's other creatures out there besides dogs. There's cattle and what have you. So that's kind of where you're at in this part of the county out there. So it is kind of removed where they're at out there. So, I don't see a problem with some proper techniques that they're saying also for doing some sound on that.
Yes.
Following up on Mr. Kenny, if she wanted to put in pigs, cows, geese, none of that requires a conditional use permit because this is out in the county. This is rural areas. I know you want to think of it as a neighborhood, but it's rural areas. It's zoned RA. Of course, with the ag building next door, you have all the spraying going on, the tractors going. You're in the county. You're out. I can see a lot more noisier animals going in than dogs.
Yeah. Madam Chair, if there's nothing else to be said, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval, conditional use permit 02-14.
Righty, is there a second?
Second.
Any other comments? Mr. Moan?
Moan, yes.
Dunlap, yes.
Triplett, yes.
Kenny, yes.
Bolden, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Oates, yes.
Manuel, yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Marston, yes.
Unger, yes.
And the chair votes yes. This will go to the Board of Supervisors. Hang on a sec, I gotta get my page. On the 23rd of April. And I want everybody to keep in mind what a conditional use permit is, okay? Take a read of it. All right. Our next item is also a public hearing. It's an ordinance amendment to the Frederick County Code. It's Chapter 165 zoning, Article 7 overlay districts, Part 702 FP floodplain districts. And these revisions have come to us from the Department of Conservation and Recreation at the state level, and it's regarding their model floodplain management ordinance. Ms. Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission. As you stated, this is a public hearing for revisions to Part 702, which is the floodplain districts. Now, you may recall the current floodplain ordinance was revised back in 2009 as directed by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, DCR. Now, DCR has since modified the state model floodplain ordinance, and revisions to Part 702 are now necessary to meet the minimum regulatory standards required in a fully compliant floodplain ordinance. Now, the primary revisions to the floodplain ordinance are new text regarding designation and duties of the floodplain administrator, which for our county is the zoning administrator. There's new sections for jurisdictional boundary changes and submission of technical data. There's some relocated text for the description of special flood hazard districts. There's revised factors to be considered when granting variances. There's revised elevation and construction standards, as well as some new and modified definitions. Now, the DRC discussed this at their January 2014 meeting, and the Planning Commission held a discussion on March 5th, the Board of Supervisors then on March 12th, and sent it forward to public hearing. So tonight we are seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors on this proposed ordinance amendment. I'd be glad to answer questions.
Questions, Mrs. Perkins? Yes, Mr. Oates.
If we don't adopt this agenda, basically, our citizens won't be able to participate in the FEMA program, right?
Correct. If we do not have a fully compliant floodplain ordinance, FEMA will not offer flood insurance in our locality.
So then they'd have to pay through the nose through private. So we have no choice.
I think that's short and sweet. Any further comments, Mrs. Perkins? Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this ordinance change? Anybody at all? This is a public hearing.
Good evening. My name is Dodie Stottlemyre, and I live in the Shawnee District. I was concerned about some of the language relating to the addition of the floodplain management administrator, because it's about 6 pages that relates to the duties and everything else. I'm sure that you guys know what you're doing. The other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was I did visit the website for the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and it says on the model floodplain management ordinance that these provisions cannot be adopted verbatim. Every municipality making use of these provisions will have to make some choices and modifications depending on the kinds of flood hazard districts and information contained in its flood insurance study and the community's own particular circumstances and objectives or policy. And I did read their model ordinance today, but it is almost verbatim what you guys are. I didn't know if there was any kind of if you guys had noticed that?
I think that excuse me.
Well, I'd like to comment. Yeah, we chose to just do the minimums and not add to it. And part of it was like, say, insert Frederick County here where it says county. But, yeah, we didn't want to embellish it and make it worse. We just said, what's the minimum we have to do? And that was what we went for.
Yeah. I mean, that I understand, but it says for the on the model ordinance that you can't adopt that particular ordinance verbatim. Am I misunderstanding that one?
I think that Mrs. Perkins can help you and all of us with that.
I just thought I might want to point that. I figured that you guys already knew that, but maybe I was misunderstanding what they meant with that particular phrasing.
We can talk about our experience.
I bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak regarding this? Well, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. Mrs. Perkins, would you like to share?
The state model ordinance is a very large document, and if you take the document in its entirety, it applies to all different localities. You have a lot of areas that have coastal issues, so the ordinance has things like that wouldn't apply to our locality. And there's also modifications to the text that you have to make to insert your jurisdiction name. So you can't just take the model ordinance and adopt it as is. You have to make modifications. And I would note that the ordinance back in 2009 was done the same way as this. We took the state model that was given to us by DCR and modified it to meet Frederick County's needs. And you would note in your agenda, there's a memo from the gentleman from DCR stating the change sections that we were required to have.
Did you see that? Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? This is a public hearing. Anyone else like to speak to us? I think I gave that opportunity before, but we will close the public hearing. I think we need to do something with this.
I'm not a fan of it, but I'll recommend approval, or excuse me, recommend adoption.
Second. There's no choice.
There's no choice. Okey doke. How about Ms. Stronger? Shall we vote?
Yes.
Marston, yes. Ambrogi, yes.
Manuel, yes.
Oates, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Molden, yes.
Kenny, yes.
Triplett, yes. Dunlap, yes.
Moan, yes.
And the chair votes yes. This also will go to the board on the 23rd of April. Our third item is an information and discussion item for the commission, and it's master development requirements. And these discussions were on revisions to Part 801 of the Frederick County zoning ordinance, master development plans per the Business-Friendly Recommendations Committee. Mrs. Perkins.
Again, thank you. Just a little background. Back in October of 2012, the Board of Supervisors formed what is called the Business-Friendly Committee to evaluate the current processes and procedures being utilized in the county. Now, the purpose of that effort was to search for ways that the county could better meet the needs of new and existing businesses within the community. Now, the committee's final report was adopted by the board in July of 2013. Now, one of the recommendations contained within the report was to eliminate the master development plan requirement contained in the zoning ordinance, and that was forwarded to the DRC for review and consideration. Now, the DRC reviewed the master plan requirements at their October 2013 meeting and their January 2014 meeting. Now, the DRC disagreed that the master plan should be eliminated in its entirety. The committee felt that it was an important process for both the locality as well as the applicants and the public for a variety of reasons. Now, the committee, however, did recommend that the master plan ordinance be modified to allow for a waiver of the master plan if an applicant chooses to process a detailed site plan in lieu of the master plan. So that's what's in the ordinance that's in your agenda package. So tonight we are seeking comments from the Planning Commission to forward to the Board of Supervisors on this effort.
Okay. Any comments from the group that worked on it, from DRRC?
I'll pipe in. I was one of them that was against removing it because I have some clients, and by getting a master plan approved, it protects them, especially on bigger developments. You nail down where the roads are going to be, the entrances are going to be, where the buffers are, and no matter what changes, that master plan is locked in forever. So they're protected from changes, and just from that standpoint, to protect clients, is one reason I was vocal.
But this really gives the client the option. If they want to request a waiver, they can now.
They have the option, yes.
If they don't want to request a waiver, they don't have to, and so I think it's a good compromise.
Do we agree on that?
I agree very much.
Okay. Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And my understanding is that this will go back to, it'll go to the Board of Supervisors. Okay. The next item is also Mrs. Perkins. It's the landscape requirements, and it's discussion on revisions to Part 203 of the Frederick County zoning ordinance, buffers and landscaping per the Business Friendly Recommendations Committee. Mrs. Perkins.
Again, thank you. Now, this discussion is also based out of the Business Friendly Committee, so I'll skip the introduction on that one. But another recommendation that came out of the report was for a complete review and reevaluation of the buffer and landscaping requirements to provide a well-defined purpose to allow for flexibility in project site landscaping, tree preservation, and effective development buffers. Now, that was the text that came out of the report. Now, the DRC reviewed the landscaping ordinance at their September 2013, January 2014, and February 2014 meetings. Now, I just want to clarify, there was a memo that was provided as part of the report that was established. It had a number of recommendations. Now, it wasn't included in the Planning Commission agenda, however, it was part of the DRC agenda, and they reviewed that at all the meetings. I would note that we actually took that memo and took all of the suggestions and put them in text boxes throughout the entire landscaping ordinance to show all of the relevant sections that the requested changes would have applied to. So just want to, the DRC actually went through all of the recommendations provided, and the suggestions that came out of the DRC is what is included in your agenda. So kind of the short part of that is the DRC recognized that the buffer and landscaping sections were recently reviewed. You know, back in January of 2013, the Board of Supervisors adopted a pretty substantial overhaul to the landscaping requirements as part of the RP updates. And we also, a few years back, modified the buffer requirements, and that substantially reduced the buffer requirements for a property. And then again, the rural areas landscaping lot requirements were removed a number of years ago as well. So the committee felt that the existing ordinance is adequate and appropriate. Now, the DRC did recommend that the parking lot landscaping requirements be moved out of the parking lot section into the landscaping section to ensure that they were all within one section. So tonight, staff is seeking comments from the Planning Commission to forward to the Board of Supervisors. Glad to answer any questions.
Any comments for Mrs. Perkins?
I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in on this one, too. Of the localities I work in, as far as doing landscaping, this county is by far the simplest and easiest one to work in. Of things that could be done to save money on site development, this is like if you had a cake, these are sprinkles on top. It's the easiest part of the site plan. I wish we had looked at other parts of the site plan, like there's a lot of places where you can save a lot of pavement and some curbing and concrete and really drop the cost of site development. But if the board so desires, I don't have a problem if they want to send it back to DRC and let Mr. Good make a bitch and try and sway us.
Anyone else?
Well, you know, I think it would be appropriate to I hate to have stuff go back to the committee.
Me too.
Probably to make sure that the committee understood what the business-friendly group was trying to get across and articulate. It might not be a bad idea to have it come back and let Mr. Good or him or his group come in and make a pitch on why they feel the way they do.
That's what I was going
I was definitely opposed to the tree committee part of it, and having a tree committee review site plans and stall everything down that way. That's one part I'm not in favor of, forming another committee.
I see, let me look at Mr. Lawrence for a sec, because I do believe that this will be, in other words, the expectation is the Planning Commission will not see this again. Is that correct?
Certainly, you control it at this point. If you want to send it back to committee, it's your project to figure out how you want to dispose of it ultimately. I would suggest if you take it back to committee, we would bring it back to you to give you an update as to what the committee's reaction was.
Right.
Ultimately, we will give the Board of Supervisors a recommendation, whether it's tonight or another month or so. You can decide what works best.
Ask a question?
Yes.
Is it on the board's next agenda to
No.
discuss?
It's not scheduled at this point.
All right.
Good. So I would also reiterate what Mrs. Perkins said, and that the DRRC saw all of the recommendations and dealt with them one by one by one. So if Mr. Light would like to come in and talk with DRRC.
Mr. Good.
I'm good, excuse me. I'm sorry, John. Anyway, I think it would be up to you all to decide.
We need a motion to,
I think so.
I'd make a motion that we let it go back to the DRRC and let the business-friendly committee make a presentation and then bring it back to the board.
Second.
Any other comments? Mr. Moan?
Moan, yes.
Dunlap, yes. Turpin, yes.
Kenny, no.
Bolton, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Votes yes.
Manuel, yes. Ambrogi, yes. Marston, no.
Unger, no.
And the chair votes yes. This will go back to the DRRC. Thank you. Let's see, I believe this is our last item. It's a significant one. It's the UDA centers, as we've been working with them in the 2030 Comprehensive Plan. We, as a commission, have seen this a number of iterations, and what what Mr. Ruddy is going to do for us today is to talk about this amendment as it supports the UDA Design Center Cabinet Report and the draft TND, Traditional Neighborhood Design Ordinance. And this would be proposed to become part of our comprehensive plan within Chapter 1, Urban Areas for the future. So, Mr. Ruddy, would you share with us where we are?
I would do. Thanks, Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This gives us a good opportunity to review where we are in this proposed amendment and to hopefully make other folks aware of what has been occurring. This proposed amendment was initiated by the Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee. It was a result of the ongoing effort and the discussion, as you mentioned, about the Urban Center Design Cabinet Report and the Traditional Neighborhood Design, the TND zoning ordinance, that we've discussed at various work sessions and most recently in the Planning Commission retreat. Those two items being the catalyst for this discussion, it would hope that once the amendment has been appropriately dealt with, then we will be able to move forward with those two items and hopefully get them in place as a good option, a good choice for the county's urban areas. Going back a little bit through the history, most recently the Comp Plan Committee reviewed the amendment, expressed their support for it, and again encouraged us to move forward and hopefully move both items also forward through the process ultimately. What this effort tried to do was, again, maintain some consistency in the comprehensive plan, but also pull thoughts that are throughout the comprehensive plan together as the foundation for what we are doing. And probably more importantly, a couple of questions were asked during the work session that we had before Christmas, really the who and the why, or the why and the who. Why do we have UDA centers and urban areas within the county, and who would they be for? Who would they benefit? Well, I think that it's pretty clear that the urban development area centers are an integral part of the county's overall growth management strategy, key locations, key strategic locations for a variety of reasons that would support the county's growth in the urban areas in a desirable way. And the who, there's a good discussion in there about the county's growth, where that comes from, the rate of the growth, the out-commuting and in-commuting, and a variety of other elements. But suffice to say, what we want to do is enable residents, both current and future, recent graduates and recent retirees, and existing residents, to choose from an array of housing types that suit their needs and provide housing opportunities, be they regular or affordable. So the implementation of this seeks to ensure that that will be met, again, in a good quality urban design. So in answering the who and the why, hopefully that gets us to that point. And then the amendment itself is very similar to the one we just did with the public facilities in the 2030 comprehensive plan. Again, it's to pull components of the comprehensive plan together in one spot that supports this particular item. So this one, of course, is called Frederick County UDA Centers, and it contains a couple of policies and a variety of ways to implement them. But the primary policy states that as Frederick County continues to grow, it is essential that the comprehensive plan for the urban areas meet the expected growth of the community in a sustainable manner. And growth should be primarily focused within the urban areas. Moreover, more intensive development should be focused in the UDA centers, particularly meeting the residential needs of the young adults, the retirement generation, and the workforce needed for business development, again, to really strike and reinforce what and why we are doing this. The second policy, again, further addresses that by saying that they are located in strategic locations within the urban areas, and they should absorb a portion of the community growth with a maximum efficiency and effectiveness. And again, to be attractive to young adults, newly retired, and a whole variety of residents of the county, both present and future. So again, we've talked about this quite a bit, and the document that is the Urban Center, UDA Center report, in addition to the TND zoning ordinance, really moves the county forward a long way and does seek to implement the comprehensive plan. It's hoped that this amendment further reinforces that and moves us to the next level. And again, at this point, it's a discussion item at the Planning Commission, and when we go to the Board of Supervisors, we'll take whatever input we have this evening from the Planning Commission and hopefully get some direction to move this amendment through the public hearing process. And if there are any questions that the Commission may have, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions of Mike?
I would like to make one comment. I admire your tenacity on this because you have put in a yeoman's duties on doing this. You should be commended. So I would like to bring that up.
Yes. One thing I want to make sure is that this was an iteration that we saw and didn't see. We talked about, maybe we did, at the retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue was, I think, one that was raised by the chairman of the board at our workshop regarding this subject. And his question was, for whom are we doing this? And I want to make sure that we have answered that. And so would that be helpful, Mike?
Yeah, we believe it does. It's recognized currently in the comprehensive plan, but perhaps in a variety of spaces. This reinforces that, and it certainly does recognize and state within there several times who this is aimed at. The supporting discussion goes with it to hopefully, again, clarify that too. So the intent is to do that.
Does it?
What page?
Don't have to subscribe to it or something.
Kind of thought it did when I read it, but I guess it depends how specific you're looking for the statement in it. But, it addresses that it's looking for people moving in from outside Frederick County, for the most part, young adults and young retired people that want a more walkable, close-knit community with higher standards, higher design standards. I think it answered it for me, but, maybe the chairman has a more specific answer he's looking for. I'm not sure.
I think it's existing residents, it's young and old, and of course, as the county continues to grow, more of those people are going to be from Frederick County residents. So what opportunities are there and available for those residents, the residents of the community?
Yeah, I see it as a way of keeping the younger kids, the graduates, from wanting to take off for the city because of the amenities down there, and try and keep something here and keep our kids local.
And be able to provide them a place to live
And jobs.
and jobs.
And that does get back to what it is, meeting the residential needs of the community today, the young adults, the retirement generation, and all of the workforce housing that we would see needed for the continued growth of the county, especially from the economic development, business development side of things.
Anything else for Mike? Because this is going to the board fairly shortly. Other comments?
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for all your work. You're sticking to it, Mike. Okay, Eric is going to speak with us about the development impact model and where we are.
It wasn't on the agenda, but earlier this week, the Development Impact Model Committee met, and they too had been looking at a business-friendly initiative. And after their meetings, 4 meetings, they had 1 work session with the board, they finally concluded their study. You all aren't part of that review process because the DeMock is a committee of the Board of Supervisors, but I saw tonight as an opportunity just to give you a quick recap as to what they've done and what their recommendation is. And I've got a PowerPoint that we used on Monday, so I'm going to run through that real fast. So if you bear with me, give me about 5 minutes, we'll give you a quick update. The Development Impact Model Committee was tasked with reevaluating the DIM, which is your Development Impact Model, and taking into account the current economic conditions. Specifically, let's make sure that the capital projects that are in the model are correct. And also, let's have some consideration of credits that can be used to offset the capital impacts. Now, more often than not, your exposure to the Development Impact Model is the proffer expectation sheet that we look at when we're doing rezonings. So the model is what we use to project what the capital impacts are when you build houses in the county. So that's the typical application. So the consideration of credits is tied in more with the proffer expectation of the model. But the group did go ahead and look at the entire model. And what they found is part of the reviewing process is they said, well, let's figure out where are we from an economic aspect, if you will. Back in November, we found that our residential building permits were up 30% over the past year. So I think the group really felt that was an important figure to look at. That was a good sign for the economy. They looked at the portion of the county's budget that's dedicated to capital. And that's important because as we're trying to figure out what the impacts are of residential uses on the county, and we want to consider giving some credits for revenues that are going to be contributed, we wanted to make sure that we're looking at the capital side of the budget. And what we found is that only 7.2% of the county's budget, on average, over the past 10 years, was actual capital. So that was found part of their discussion process. We also confirmed that all the local tax rates are in the model, and they're properly in the model. They're calculating properly in the model. That was our due diligence, making sure the model still works properly. We clarified that the development impact model output, which is your proffer expectation that I referenced, is solely capital. It does not include any credit for revenue, so it doesn't look at what revenues that homeowner might be contributing to the county in terms of real estate taxes and personal property tax, your car tax aspect. And the model output that we're using for proffers does not include any debt service. The debt service is an important aspect because when you consider cash proffers as part of a rezoning, you have to look at the impacts on the county in terms of the capital impacts, but debt service is not part of that consideration. So we were able to confirm that and how the model operates. We actually ran the model, and typically we don't use it for this benefit, but we ran the model, which looks at all the revenue and all the capital impacts, and what we found is for a single-family dwelling, the fiscal impacts on the county, and that's your operations, that's your capital. So that's not just the school building, but that's also the teachers, if you will. But if you look at the whole county, over a 20-year period, the expenses of that single-family home generated about $133,000 in demand and services. But the revenues that were coming out of that same house were coming up to projected to come in around $73,000. So the importance of that number is there was a shortfall. We found the model was operating properly, and these are some of the numbers that we were seeing and how it was projecting things. We did look at the cash proffer expectation, which is the annual update that we undertake. It's currently, the cash proffer expectation is $19,600, and what that says is the model projects that every time you build a house in Frederick County, over the next 20 years, it creates a negative. It creates a negative of $19,600 on the capital demands of the county. Now, we looked at other jurisdictions because we wanted to make sure, okay, are we looking at things properly? And what we found is when we looked at jurisdictions around here and we looked at jurisdictions toward the Washington area, the impacts were ranging from 15,000 to over 50,000. So that was, certainly we don't compare ourselves to other people, but if you're going to say, does our model work properly, what we said is, yeah, I think it reflects what Frederick County is. We're at the lower end of the impacts. We've got lower budget overall. We've got lower tax rates. So we felt that our model was coming in the right area, in the lower ends. The group also looked at cash proffers. What have we, trying to figure out, do we really need to use the model as part of rezonings? Are we really receiving any cash payments? And what we found is since 1995, so over the last 20 years almost, the county has received $9.4 million in cash proffer payments. Essentially, 20 years worth of residential growth, 20 years worth of residential proffers that were paid, and only a small portion of new houses actually had proffers because a lot of houses in the rural areas and the previously adopted residential districts don't have proffers. But the county had received $9.4 million in paid proffers. But the more important aspect that we found is in FY13, which essentially is last year, it ended in July, we received $1.18 million in cash contributions. Didn't study where it was coming from, but the committee said, well, that's probably because the economy's coming back and the lots that are now getting built are predominantly in the UDA, which our studies confirm that, and they're also predominantly paying proffers now. So we don't have the rural area lots that don't have proffers. We're not seeing a lot of the RP lots that don't have proffers. We're starting to see lots that have proffers getting built. So they're starting to see additional revenues come in because of the model, because of the cash proffer system. We had an opportunity to bring and have some Q&A with Carson Bice, who actually created the impact model that we used. He created the model in 2005. We got in touch with him, and he came out and met with us one day. He didn't charge us, so he came out and met with the impact model committee and had about an hour and a half time with him. He answered a number of questions that were presented to him in advance of the meeting, and we had an excellent dialogue with him. And some of the things that we learned is the way our model was designed, our development impact model, it's a direct impact model. It's not an indirect impact model. And that's the importance there is it's designed to look at the impacts on Frederick County's budget, but it doesn't look at all the outside effects. If you go to the retail store and the restaurant, those are the indirect costs. It only looks at the cost that you directly pay to the county. So that's your real estate tax, that's your personal property tax. And that's the way it's designed. So I think that was an important aspect that we talked about. At the end of our discussion with Mr. Bice, the question was posed to him, well, does this model still function as designed? And he honestly said, I haven't studied your model. I know how it works, but I haven't actually dug into it to make sure it's still functioning properly. But he said, let me take a look at it. So about 2-3 weeks after our meeting with him, he reported back that he had a chance to dissect our model. We gave him a copy, so he was looking at what we're using. He dissected it, said the calculations, the functions, the links, everything is still working properly, and he said the model is still accurate. He noted that the figures that need to be updated had been updated, tax rates, budgetary stuff. So he said the model is as good as new, essentially. So he reaffirmed that the model works as designed. The Development Impact Model Oversight Committee also discussed the potential revenue credits. Now, this is something that we got from the Business Friendly. The model for proffer expectation only looks at capital. So the group said, should we look at providing revenue credits? So we looked at 3 different scenarios. We said, well, should we get revenue credits for residential growth? Should we consider revenue credits for commercial and residential mixed-use environments? And should we consider credits for transportation proffers that exceed what a TIA was recommending? We've had a number of projects that have come in and the proposals have stepped above and beyond what the TIA said, and they said, because we need this transportation improvement, and we're going to do it. So the consideration was, should there be credit for that? And I can tell you that what the group recommended on the transportation has actually been adopted by the Board of Supervisors. So the group did recommend that the board enable credits when proffered transportation improvements exceed those identified in the TIA. And the board actually approved and has implemented that recommendation. They did it a couple months ago. Now, I can tell you, to date, the group found there's no glaring inequities in this model. They concluded that additional revisions to the model there were no additional revisions to the model warranted. They felt the calculations, everything is good. They said the economy seems to be going in the right direction, so they didn't feel that warranted reductions in the proffer. So on Monday, that was their recommendation is that we keep it the way it is. It's updated, it's functioning, and their suggestion was you don't change things at this point. So that recommendation is going to be carried to the board whenever the board chooses to schedule the business-friendly updates. But I wanted to share that with you because that's a study that a couple of you have participated on. Paige is on the committee, Roger's on the committee, and the benefit of sharing it tonight is simply because the rest of you probably wouldn't have had an opportunity to understand what was going on in a secondary effort that the Board of Supervisors had initiated. But there you have it as an update. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the model. I would note that the committee did say, okay, we've completed our study, so they're not digging into it anymore, but they will reconvene in May, June of every year like they do and update the model again, which is their annual exercise. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to respond to them. See none. Thank you.
Thank you. That was informative. Let's see, we have one more thing to do. It appears that we do not have an agenda for April the 16th, so.
Move we cancel April 16th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. And,
Move for adjournment. Second.
all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much.